Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing into the powdered, perfumed world of Louis XIV's royal court, the place where hairstyles weren't just fashionable. They were weapons of politics, vanity, and pure theatrical drama. You're waking up in a quiet Parisian townhouse, sometime around 1685, where the air already smells faintly of lavender and old talcum. Outside, the streets are cobbled and still dark, save for the pale blue light of dawn slipping over the slate rooftops. Inside, servants move silently across parquet floors, carrying bundles of hair and powdered cloths. There's a wig stand by, the fire one of dozens. A delicate porcelain bowl of hairpins sits beside an ivory-handled comb, and in the corner, a freshly unwrapped wig rests on a mannequin head, towering and stiff like a featherless peacock, waiting for its turn under the hot curling irons. This, you realize, is the calm before the coiffure storm. You sit in the dressing room, maybe wrapped in silk or linen, watching the world come to life around you. A valet quietly lays out the day's garments, while another starts brushing out the remnants of yesterday's powder from your wig stand. There's a strange rhythm to this ritual powder puff. Smooth, set, and then you remember the reality. You probably won't survive this. Not the wig, I mean the century. A tooth infection might get you first. But let's not worry about that right now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing which corners of the world are drifting off with me now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink slowly. It's early morning, and the court is still asleep. Even Louis XIV himself hasn't yet appeared in his famously choreographed rising ceremony, the lever d'oro. But already, the beauty prep has begun. Because you don't just wake up in Versailles and head to breakfast, you prepare. And so does your hair. Somewhere down the hall, a servant stirs flour into a soft muslin bag, ready to be slapped across wigs for the perfect pale finish. It's not baking dates. Hair date are your own wig styled, in the tall, curled fashion, popular with courtiers is lying beside you, like a sleeping animal. Not real hair, of course. It's made of horsehair, or maybe goat, stiff and resilient, already curled into tiny, tidy rolls that will soon frame your face in symmetrical waves. A soft knock, the hairdresser enters. He's seen things, curling burns, powder accidents. One time, a nobleman sneezed mid-styling and took out half a powdered wig like a cannonball. The man was never the same. But for now, the hairdresser sets to work with practiced grace. The curling iron is heated not with electricity, of course, but in the fire. One wrong move and you've got a singed tuft and a long day of explaining. And yes, that's real hair burning. Not yours, at least, not anymore. You lean back and close your eyes. Powder drifts softly into the air. It smells like lavender, stale bread, and oddly enough raw potato. Flour, after all, wasn't originally made for hair, but necessity, as always, birthed fashion. The faint sound of someone sneezing comes from the next room. Classic. Back in your own dressing chamber, things are progressing. The stylist hums softly as he pinches and sculpts, coaxing the wig into more height, more symmetry. You can feel the weight of it growing, almost like a gentle hand pressing down on your head. It's not painful, not yet. Just present. And here's the thing. You don't wear this wig because it's comfortable. You wear it because everyone else does. Because the Sun King does. Because without it, you'd look like a provincial, you'd look poor. Historians still argue whether Louis XIV's obsession with wigs stemmed more from his thinning hair, or from his desire to control the image of his court. But what's certain is this. Once he started, no one dared stop. Even the poorest noble tried to afford something on their head. Some wore ratty, lopsided little puffs that barely counted. Others, desperate to keep up appearances, bought second-hand wigs from traders near the palace gates. Ones that smelled suspiciously like wet dog and chamber pots. But not you. Yours is immaculate. A curled temple roll here. A clean center part. There. And soon, the powder bag appears. With a gentle slap, your head becomes a bakery. A soft cloud of starch and lavender envelopes your vision. You resist the urge to sneeze. You fail. Everyone pretends not to notice. You feel oddly serene. This is not a quick routine. It might take over an hour more if the curls collapse. But there's no rushing it. You're not putting on hair. You're constructing a monument. A few finishing touches are riven here. A decorative pin there, and the wig is complete. Tall, regal, unshakable, for now. And just in time, because outside, a trumpet call sounds. The court is stirring. The king is rising. And hair everywhere is being fluffed to perfection. Your day, like your wig, is fully built. So let's slow roll into the why of it all. Why was everyone at Louis XIV's court walking around with what looked like a loaf of bread perched on their heads? It starts, of course, with Louis himself. When Louis XIV came to power in the mid-1600s, he didn't just reign. He performed monarchy. Everything about him was calculated, grand, and symbolic. He called himself the Sun King not just because he liked dramatic nicknames, but because he wanted to be seen as the center of the universe. Naturally, his appearance had to match the myth. As he aged, Louis began losing his hair. Not an uncommon fate for men of the time, but for a man who was France, this couldn't stand. So he turned to wigs, not modest, practical wigs, but towering, curling masterpieces that made him look larger than life. Hair became part of his brand, and when the king did something, the court followed. Always, no questions asked. If Louis wore an enormous powdered wig with 20 symmetrical curls and a pomaded center part, you did too, or you'd risk looking like a nobody. Looking natural, ironically, made you look unfashionable. So noblemen, courtiers, diplomats, even military officers, rushed to imitate the royal style. Even teenage boys wore them. In fact, noble children would sometimes be dressed in miniature versions of adult court-style wigs. Included, like little dolls, puffed and powdered, and silently panicked under the weight of it all. But the influence didn't stop at Versailles. The French court was the fashion epicenter of Europe. English gentlemen, Italian nobles, German princes, everyone looked to France to see what was new, or what was next. So, as Louis XIV's hair grew taller, so did the countenance. A visit to court was a chance to be seen, to win favor, to climb the social ladder, and if you showed up without the proper hairstyle, your audience might be over before it began. You weren't just wearing hair. You were speaking a language. And what exactly was this language saying? Power, wealth, patience, and above all obedience. Your wig said, I understand the rules, and I follow them, even if it meant sweating half to death in July while wearing a dead goat on your head. That's the thing about Louis XIV's influence. It wasn't enforced by guards or mandates. It was enforced by expectation. By silent looks in the mirror hallways, by the sound of snickers when someone's curls weren't symmetrical enough, by the absence of invitations. And so, the court continued, layer upon layer of powder, curl, and performance, all circling one very radiant man. As night falls on Versailles, candles flicker in hundreds of chandeliers. The mirrored walls bounce golden light in every direction. And beneath all that glow, wigs, everywhere. A sea of powdered heads gently bobbing, whispering, laughing. You close your eyes. You try to imagine a world without this hair, without the spectacle. But you can't, because for one long powdered century, this was fashion. This was status. This was the way the world worked. And all because one king refused to go bald quietly. You wake up one morning in Versailles. You're still pretending to be a noble and notice something odd. Everyone's hair seems taller, not just styled, not just powdered. Taller, like someone set out to turn each person into a cake, and kept piling on extra frosting. So why did wigs get so big? Short answer, competition. Long answer, fashion, politics, and just the tiniest pinch of absurdity. The early wigs of Louis XIV's court were already impressive. But by the 1700s especially, during the reign of Louis XV and Louis XVI, things had escalated dramatically. Like skyscraper, level escalated. You're looking at structures that added feet to a person's height. Some wigs had cages inside them. Others were wired to stay aloft, like fluffy scaffolding. A few required ladders to assemble. Okay, not really, but close. For men, wigs typically stuck to defined curls, rolled in precise, neat spirals. But women had the creative license. Their hairstyles could depict naval battles, gardens, fruit arrangements. One woman famously wore a model of her husband's ship in her hair to celebrate a French naval victory. Yes, it had tiny sails and flags. And yes, it caused traffic jams in the corridor. But this wasn't just some quirky hobby, it was status, in physical form. The more elaborate the wig, the more likely you were to be rich, connected, or both. You didn't need to carry your social class around on a certificate, when your hairstyle already screamed it to everyone within eyesight. And maintaining that volume, it took time, lots of it. which meant you had servants or paid stylists, who could work for hours to tease, curl, and construct. The average court lady didn't do her own hair. She sat patiently while others sculpted her public identity. Here's where things get weird. There's a legitimate debate among historians about just how tall some of these wigs really got. Surviving portraits suggest exaggeration, but satirical cartoons from the era which loved mocking high society show wigs 3-4 feet high. Was it real? Was it parody? Historians still argue whether the famous poof styles of Marie Antoinette were practical fashion, or just visual metaphors for the excess of the time. What's not debated? They were heavy and itchy, and not exactly ideal in windy weather. Walking through the gardens with your hair 3 feet tall is a commitment. And don't even think about door frames. To keep things looking fresh. Wigs were powdered with mixtures that included wheat flour, or starch sometimes dyed with lilac, blue, or soft pink. The powders weren't just for looks. They masked odors and covered up oily buildup from days or weeks without washing. Fun fact, that's why you needed hairpins like your life depended on them. Oh, and guess what helped hold everything in place? Animal fat. Yeah, pomade was often made from bear grease. So if your carefully sculpted coiffure started smelling like a zoo by day 3, well, that was the price of elegance. So you've got wheat flour, animal fat, wire cages, scented powder, and maybe a ship or two balanced delicately above your head while trying to maintain poise, charm, and courtly grace. Glamorous. Absolutely. Comfortable? Not even a little. And yet, somehow, everyone leaned into it. You didn't want to be the one person at the Royal Opera with a modest bob while the Duchess beside. You had a hairstyle featuring a 3-tiered garden party. Imagine ducking every time you walk under a doorway, or sleeping upright so your curls wouldn't flatten, or turning sideways to pass through a crowd like a human sail. You smirk, lying there in the dark, picturing these powdered giants of fashion parading around in shoes with buckles the size of bagels. It's absurd. It's glorious. It's history. And as your breathing slows, the last thing you picture is a ballroom full of towering heads, swirling like whipped cream in candlelight. History, you think, is a little weird sometimes. And thank goodness for that. Somewhere just beyond the golden gates of Versailles, in a cramped workshop tucked between a perfumer and a ribbon maker, the wig maker stirs. It's barely past 5 in the morning, but in court life, that's practically mid-morning. Especially if you're in charge of assembling the hairpieces that nobles will parade like wearable real estate. You imagine him now half awake, bleary-eyed, tugging on a loose linen shirt and stepping over a wooden bucket of curled horsehair. The floor creaks beneath his boots. Sunlight hasn't even touched the eaves yet, but already he's boiling water, heating irons, and laying out rows of curled locks like a soldier preparing for battle. Because make no mistake, this is battle. The raw materials are everywhere. Baskets of horsehair, boxes of human hair, some imported, some local, threads dyed every shade of powdered gray, and fattiest, jars of pomade, made from bear fat or beef marrow, whipped with herbs to lessen the smell. A pot of rose oil sits nearby, not for the wigs, but for his own sanity. He starts with the base, a foundation of netting and woven ribbon that will eventually sit mostly snugly, on a client's scalp. Then, by hand, he knots in each lock of hair, strand by strand, curl by curl. You'd think a job this delicate would be slow and meditative. But he's got 4 commissions due by noon, and a duchess who wants a new design with silk birds and a matching bow. Outside, Versailles is still asleep. Inside, the wig world is bustling. He reaches for his iron's-long flat tools, heated over a coal brazier. They hiss faintly as they press into the curled strands. One false move, and the entire thing could scorch. There's no backup, no second batch, and certainly no time to explain to a marquise why her garden coiffure smells like roasted ponytail. He works in silence, save for the occasional mumble. You imagine him whispering complaints to the curls themselves. Stay flat. Just stay. But they never listen. By 7, the workshop smells like a bakery. Oddly enough, that's from the powder mix of rice, flour, iris root, and lavender, sifted gently onto finished wigs like a pastry garnish. It dulls shine, masks odors, and gives that soft, velvety matte finish the aristocracy adored. That's the first servant. Arrives panting, wide-eyed, dressed in livery. You sense the shift. It's time. The wigs must go. The wig maker wraps them gently in linen and sends them off, like sending delicate pastries into a thunderstorm. This one's for the countess, who insists on 7 loops on either side. That one's for a baron, Who wants a hunting scene in his hair, and that huge one? That's for someone attending the Royal Opera tonight. She wants it to resemble a Grecian temple. No pressure. You picture the wig maker slumping into a stool once they're gone. Not resting, just breathing. Until the next order comes in. Which it will. By lunch. Historians still argue whether some wig makers were also stylists, personally adjusting the wigs on their clients' heads, or if separate court-appointed coiffeurs took over once the wigs arrived. But it's clear the wig maker held power, behind-the-scenes power. After all, if you're supplying the thing nobles fight to outdo each other with, you're not just a craftsman, you're an uncredited trendsetter. There's even evidence that some wig makers kept notebooks of designs, intricate sketches of styles, with names like La Belle Poule, Cour de Grâce, or La Montgolfière, which, yes, featured a hot air balloon. They weren't just tradesmen. They were hair architects. You imagine one such sketch now, an entire farm scene, complete with sheep made of cotton, and fences made of thread, pinned delicately into an elaborate wig. You smirk again. This wasn't just fashion. This was performance. Art. On your head. And behind it all, before the candlelit salons and royal promenades, was a man in a small, overheated room, burning his fingers on curling irons and brushing horsehair like a man possessed. Maybe he never got the credit. Maybe no one even remembered his name. But his wigs. They made history. You try to lie down. You try to get comfortable. But there it is. The mountain of powdered elegance, strapped to your head like a frosted wedding cake. 3 feet tall, 30 pounds heavy, stuffed with ribbons, wire, velvet, and at least 2 waxed pears. Welcome to bedtime at Versailles, where sleep is optional, but maintaining your hairpiece's architectural integrity is not. You can't help but picture it, a marquise or duchess, perched stiffly on a chaise longue, trying not to tilt her head too far in any direction, because this wig isn't coming off. Not tonight. Not without an entourage of assistants and a full bottle of rosewater. And you know what? She has dinner with the king tomorrow. It's safer to sleep sitting up. Some noble women had elaborate bolster systems, pillows carefully arranged behind the neck and lower back to keep their bodies upright through the night. Others used wooden headrests, imported from East Asia, and promptly turned into fashion accessories. Did it work? Depends on your definition of comfort. If you consider not rolling onto your hair sculpture a victory, then yes. You shift slightly. In bed, imagining the rustle of fabric, the faint scent of lavender powder and animal fat, wafting from your own towering coiffure. It's kind of absurd. And yet, weirdly cozy. The practical downside. Hygiene. You weren't removing that wig every night, especially if it was stitched to your own hair, which it often was. Instead, you kept it on for days, sometimes a week, or more. You just added more powder, more pomade, maybe a spritz of orange water. If something itched, well, try not to think about it. Historians still argue whether lice were an accepted inevitability among the elite, or whether personal servants had ways of preventing infestations using herbs or fine combs. But let's be honest, when you're sleeping, upright in a wig the size of a fruit stand, a few lice probably aren't your biggest problem. Now imagine the early morning routine after such a night. A servant gently knocking, entering with a warm cloth and a tray of diluted wine. Your back is stiff, your neck is sore, your hair smells like rosemary and yesterday's goose dinner. But you made it. The wig stayed in place, and now, it needs freshening. A maid brings over a tray of tools, stiff brushes, hair powder, tweezers, a tiny spoon for applying pomade, and yes, a bellows. Not for fire, but for puffing powder between tight curls without disturbing the arrangement. A slight tug here, a twist there. Maybe a fresh rosebud tucked in for flair. All done with the delicacy of a surgeon performing lacework. This wasn't vanity, it was diplomacy. Hair sent messages. Were you fashionable? Loyal to the crown? Aligned with a faction? The right hairpiece could declare your allegiance to the Dauphin, your disdain for another courtier, or your support for naval expansion. All without saying a word. There's even one record though. It's probably exaggerated. Of a woman who wore a miniature ship in her hair to celebrate a French naval victory, complete with sails and cannons. The coiffure et la Belle Poule. You wouldn't sleep in that one unless you enjoyed waking up tangled in rigging. But most nights, the wigs were a little simpler. Powdered, teased, and padded, but not necessarily a health hazard. You might even grow fond of the weight, like a hat you forgot you were wearing. Still, you long for a proper maybe just a few moments horizontal. But no, you remember the maid's warning. Don't crush the bouffant. so you stay upright. Chin slightly tilted, eyes closed, dreaming of a future where maybe, just maybe, someone invents a wig stand. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of Versailles, dozens of other noblemen and women doze upright wax fruit, glinting in candlelight. Powdered curls resting gently on silk pillows, all hoping that, come morning, the shape still holds.